Welcome to Crio Dev Sprint. In this video, I'm going to give you more details about our product developer experience. So let's get started. We're going to focus on our Java backend developer experience in this video. The Java backend developer experience consists of 4 parts. The first part, we're going to focus on Linux. Linux is a development environment of choice for many product developers. To get you started on Linux, we have a micro experience called Qbox, like Dropbox. It's an online file sharing application. Through Qbox, you're going to get an in-depth introduction to developer workflows on Linux. You're going to set up Qbox, a file sharing application, on a Linux server. Now, before you install and set up Qbox, you want to have to check what are the system resources available, disk space, CPU utilization, memory, and you're going to use Linux utilities to find out all these things. You're also going to write a few shell scripts and get familiar with automating some of the developer workflows on Linux. Since it's an online file sharing application, you also have to worry about network connectivity and reachability of remote servers. So you're going to get exposure into networking utilities in Linux like netstat and ping and TCP dump. You're going to use Wireshark and try to debug why some connections are not going through or that the speed of file transfers are very slow. So all in all, through Qbox, you get a very in-depth exposure to Linux. And for those of you who are using Linux for the first time, I think this will be a very good introduction, and you'll be able to get right up to speed by going through the different modules in Qbox. Now, after Qbox, we'll take you on to Java Developer Foundations. Now, most of the Java backend track focuses well on Java itself, right? You might be coming from a different language like Python or C++, but don't worry about it. If you have a decent level of programming experience in either Python, C++, or any other language, you'll be able to make that transition to Java by going through QMoney. Now, QMoney is a stock portfolio analyzer. The users purchase stocks, and within their portfolio, they have multiple stocks, right? And your job is to show the returns for each stock depending on the date on which the stock was purchased. In order to do this, you have to query a third-party service and find the price of the stock on the date it was purchased. And then, based on the current stock price, you can calculate the gain and even do further things like annualized stock returns and things like that. So, making these REST API calls using Spring REST template, debugging HTTP errors, understanding how an HTTP request is constructed, what are the data parameters that go into an HTTP request. You'll get to do all of these things as part of QMoney. You'll also learn to do things like Java interfaces and factory patterns. You might have learned about this in college, but never really applied it. So here, in order to change the stock quote service that you are using, you might be querying something like Tingo, which is one of the services, and then you want to add a backup service. How do you switch between these two without having to modify the business logic in each case? So all of this, including things like exception handling in case of errors and other things. And you also do things like multi-threading. Like if a user has many stocks in a portfolio, instead of querying each stock and doing it one at a time, you can actually optimize it by making parallel requests to the same stock quote service and improve user experience. So multi-threading and concurrency. So QMoney in a nutshell will give you a very thorough introduction to Java, all the basic concepts and the foundational concepts in Java, and prepare you for our next part, which is backend development. Now, here's where things get really interesting. You're going to be working on something called QEats. QEats is a food ordering app, just like Uber Eats or Swiggy. We give you an app that you can install on your phone, but the backend is not implemented, right? So we have stubs and some skeleton code, but you have to go and write all the logic in the controller layer, the view layer, and the model layer as well as the database access layer or the service layers to go and query a MongoDB database to get a list of all the restaurants and the orders and everything. So QEats actually introduces you to build a backend in an MVCS architecture, and you touch upon each layer of the backend, right? So you will get familiar with Spring Boot, which is a Java MVC framework, and through Spring Boot, you'll understand where a new REST API endpoint has to be added, and how you will handle requests that are coming to the controller and process them in the business logic layer, and then go ahead to the service layer and actually query the database and get all the relevant data that can be sent back to the app, right? So it's exciting. I mean, if you've never built a web application before, then QEats is perfect. You're going to have a fantastic time. It won't be easy, but you'll feel really good, accomplished at the end of it. Now, with these concepts that you've picked up as part of QEats and building a web application, we take you on the final frontier, which is build outs. Now, build outs is a very open challenge. It's a capstone challenge. In build outs, what we do is we give you a requirement, a functional requirement or a product requirement, right? So you go through the requirements and actually build something from scratch. There is no stub code. You have to start by designing the application, figuring out what REST API endpoints you will provide, organizing your code in a very structured way, and coming up with a solution that you can demo, and it's something you've built from scratch. So it will sort of take all the learnings in the backend developer experience, and you'll have to apply all of that in order to complete the build outs challenge. Now, build outs challenges can also be unique. So this is your project. You can put all of these things on your resume. You can share it with your friends, and talk about it in an interview setting. And because you have built all of this from scratch yourself, you know exactly why you made those decisions, and you can go into very much detail. You can go into the details of why you have actually made some of the design choices and have a very enriching discussion in an interview setting. That, in a nutshell, is what you will learn as part of the product developer experience. I hope you're excited. If you haven't signed up yet, go ahead and apply today. And if you have signed up already, see you all in the kickoff call. Thank you very much.